Right, so hello, welcome to Sisyphus Complex Solution. This is episode 184. It's called Dead Starfish. Um, Slightly Christmassy type background. I've never really done that before, but I figured what the hell this year. Anyway, you may kind of wonder a little bit about the title of Dead Starfish, and this is actually something that is a a known syndrome, literally called the dead starfish syndrome, where the definition is, and there'll be a link in the description for you to check as well. It's a metaphorical concept describing the organisational paralysis that occurs when teams or entire organisations become overwhelmed by large, seemingly intractable problems, leading to inaction and a decline in morale. It essentially explains why and how organisations sometimes fail to address issues even when they are detrimental to their survival. Seems quite apt, really, doesn't it? On a much wider scale. But in terms of this particular episode, I'm going to be running the standard process and that of continuing the audit of the MOD. But this time I'm going to do the episode sort of split into two segments, where the first part is dealing with what I'm going to be doing, which is three particular entities that are listed under the MOD, and they, I suppose, in many ways they do quite literally meet that definition of detrimental to survival. But I've also got something else that I want to talk about at the end of the segment, which I've had to kind of rush through a little bit in terms of adding to it, because there were certain things that I was watching yesterday that have added to what I wanted to actually discuss, and slightly annoying things. So when I get to the end of the process part of it, don't go anywhere. I've still got a little bit more to go. So let's get the process side out of the way first. Right, so the first entity to look at this week is the Veterans Advisory and Pensions Committees. So that's the first one to be checking, and we're back to entities that can be handled relatively quickly. Once again, there are no numbers in terms of the cost, and the reason why it's called committees is because apparently they claim to have 13 of them based on regions and then nations. So you've got the regions within England, and then you've got your Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. But the unusual thing is, and I've managed to get through and do a count up of the number of people that are involved in 12 of these committees that make up this wider group, presumably whereby they're presenting the group as a whole as the 13th factor, perhaps, don't know, but all I know is that there's only 12 of these committees listed. And what I can find from that is that there's 168 people involved in this. I mean, in terms of the name of the group and committees, it is still a little bit odd, in so much as that they're saying that that within this name they're looking at pensions. They're advising on pensions, but absolutely nowhere in these claimed responsibilities does it have anything to do with pensions. And so everything that they are suggesting that they're there to advise on is literally the same thing that is covered in the covenant. So basically you've got a committee with 168 people doing the exact same thing that other organisations are doing already, and therefore I just fail to see the point in this. And then they also don't really certain committees I can say do report with some normal level of regularity, but not all of them by any stretch. So it's all a little bit waste of timey as far as I'm concerned. There's a distinct possibility that when you have these kinds of committees, that then, yes, they are then receiving some level of pay, even if it does just come down to covering expenses and things like that. It is something that should be reported on if it ends up being some kind of a taxpayer expense, which it always does. And so that's 168 people taking money that could be put to better use. And the problem I've got with this kind of thing is I'm finding it increasingly difficult to come up with an excuse for it. If you've got something like the covenants that can then work together and improve on those multitude of charities that don't give the money to the people that they're supposed to be providing for, then we don't need this. It's just typical bureaucratic nonsense. I don't think we need it. And somebody's going to have to give me some real justification to even remotely consider keeping this one on the books. So that's all you need to say about that one. Even quicker is the Central Advisory Committee on Compensation. Exactly the same problem, no numbers, nothing much in terms of the members apart from they say that they have people turning up, again from a lot of these charity organisations. So it's basically just repeating and doing the same thing. And this one hasn't even reported anything since 2015. So quite clearly they're not advising on any compensation schemes, as if anybody needed them to do that in the first place anyway. So why are they even listed? This is a complete and utter waste of everybody's time. It's just bloated government, that's all it is, and we can get rid of it. Next one up is the advisory group on military and emergency response medicine. Right. This one is actually no longer listed underneath the MOD, but clearly is still up on the pages and sort of has a presence as if it may still well be in existence. That's something that's going to become a bit of a theme as I go forward into the likes of next week. But for the time being, I think there's a distinct possibility that even the government have found that if they are doing anything with this group at all, and that they're doing it very much in the background, because they probably found this one to be complete and utter bullshit on account of the fact that when you've got this absolute lie that you've got that I've highlighted at the bottom of making sure that medicines are safe and effective and having a good evidence base, there's possibly a good reason why this one hasn't reported anything since 2020. Maybe they've struggled to be able to maintain their end of the bargain of lying. It literally would be only absolute morons in the public that have just continued to swallow the guff around the coronavirus, and absolute liars that sit at the head of inquiries, for example, or even people that are in the NHS that are still pushing the stab crap on people. Maybe those few instances you'll have somebody that will actually give a damn about what this is supposed to be all about. The rest of us, and I would dare say an awful lot of the boys themselves are probably going, nah mate, you're alright, not interested, think you're not to be trusted anymore. So there's a distinct possibility that that is the case there. But either way, I'll just take it on its word for the time being. It's off the books. It now needs to be taken completely off the site entirely. So that is basically going to deal with completing 3 entities under the MOD. I can do it that quickly, which then means I can just give the quick normal sort of update and say this is what the finances look like, no real change because nobody's reporting any money. Going into the policy side of things, pretty simple again. The advisory group on military and emergency response medicine already gone, so therefore that just needs to be delisted, presumably already gone. And then both of that veterans advisory pensions committees and the Central Advisory Committee on Compensation, bullshit names, stick them in the abolish column, get rid, don't need it. So the part that I wanted to discuss, and this is military related, so a little bit of a mix in terms of because I'm not just specifically talking about the UK in this regard. So In case you don't remember, in the middle of November, there were some US dumbass rats that made a video calling for members of the military to refuse orders, where, just as a clarification, they did say to refuse illegal orders, though the illegal part of that was very, very low key. Now, obviously, as you can see from the typical sort of rage bait response, this was met with accusations towards those very same dumbass rats of trying to cause a military coup. Now, this is about them blowing up the boats that are coming in from Venezuela. And just to be absolutely clear, I don't care. I really don't care. It's nothing to do with me. I'm in the UK. I'm not in the US. So far as all that sort of stuff is concerned, I'm not really bothered about it. I'm not really interested in the outside circular reasoning as to what's going on with Venezuela either, because there's a whole bunch of people trying to say, oh, it's not actually about the fentanyl, it's about something else. I don't care. I'm not interested. That's not the point that I want to be focusing on right now. So what I want people to understand here is the wider perspective of how many of us have warned about things like this one world government situation. Because when you have a strategy that is then involving the US having a particular party that we know that the dumbass rats are very much solid within this one world government agenda and all of that sort of stuff. It's been obvious from everything that they've done. We have to understand what it is that they're doing as part of this particular strategy and how they're reacting. So, in terms of Europe, along similar types of theme, I think we can also be relatively in simple agreement that NATO is very much one of these tools of the one world government agenda scenario. And here we get one of their useful idiots, this Dragoni, or Dragon, I don't know, I don't care. And he's recommending illegal preemptive strikes on Russia. Now, the false nuance that he wants to fall back on is the claim of various attacks on NATO member territories, which frankly have always ended up being false flags, or they're literally doing it themselves. So this coming at pretty much a similar type of time frame as what's going on out in the States, and also at the same time that Europe has once again interfered with that peace progress in the Ukraine, where the signatures had actually been obtained between Ukraine, Russia and the US, but somehow Europe sticks their nose in again, and that suddenly equates to those agreements no longer being valid. Not entirely sure how that's supposed to work, but again, that to one side. The issue that I'm looking to raise here is you've basically got two cheeks of the same arse. So you've got your dumbass rats, and then you've got this idiot from NATO. And they're effectively saying two different things, all with the same aim. So you've got one that's claiming that the military shouldn't act illegally, and then the other one saying that we should. Both with the caveats in order to be able to make it nice and murky. So, from that, which was what I was originally going to be talking about, now I'm going to go into some stuff that I've had to add in at the last minute because of certain things that I was watching yesterday and last night. So, it began with an episode of the Lotus Eaters yesterday afternoon, and then they ended up doing a second part to it later on in the evening to apparently further flesh out the subject matter that they were discussing, which was predominantly based on this notion of China and their planned invasion of Taiwan, which, according to the conversation, was that this is going to happen in 2027. So apparently, this is something that is obviously it must be known across all the people that would need to know these things, otherwise wouldn't have been spoken about like this. And so if everybody knows about this, then everybody should be collectively organising their calendars accordingly, because war is obviously quite notorious for its pre-scheduling, isn't it? And I do say that with a level of sarcasm, because especially in this circumstance, I do suspect that there is an element of truth to this, but just not in the way that it's been presented here. There are links in the description to all of this information as well, by the way. So then later on last night, I then came across an episode that is produced by Chris Williamson, and he's talking to this fella called Peter Zeihan, I think they pronounce it, and he was providing information that I have also previously presented in June of this year in the population video. That was part 8. And just as a quick side note here, do take note of the the number of views each one of these videos gets, because I clearly don't get enough exposure for saying the things that I do before all these other people. But nevertheless, it's just a little plug for myself there. Why not? Now, what this Peter fellow was talking about is that China has got a very serious problem around its population. And in my video, I'd gone into a little bit more detail, because the claimed numbers of the population for China around this 1.4 billion, which is a figure that Firas used at the Lotus Eaters, it's not true. It's not a true figure. Now, generally speaking, I mean, I have to use a similar type of figure myself, and that when I'm doing each of the other episodes, because that's what's reported in the main figures. But when you're looking underneath that, and when you're paying attention to some of the people on the ground, for example, you do get to understand that 1.4 billion is a fake figure, and that it is way, way lower. And as much as Peter suggested it could be less by 300 to 400 million, in the video that I produced, I suggested that, or the information that is out there suggests that the population itself as a whole could be as low as 400 million. The one thing where we would actually sort of meet in the middle really is that China is going to be in serious problems and is effectively going to be a dead duck within 10 years. The collapse of China is going to happen that fast. Now, in that kind of circumstance, that's going to put quite a severe dent in this notion of an agreed war in 2027, isn't it? But there's more to think about here, because it's not the demographics is one particular issue. Unless China wants to start a war out in that region by gathering up their pensioners, because that's pretty much all they're going to be left with. There's more to it than just the demographics, because now I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this, so there's just some overview information here, and you can feel free to have a look at your own algorithmic systems and that to determine that what I'm saying here is actually true. This notion that China is the only country with rare earth minerals. No, no, it's not. They have not got this sole supplier type of scenario around rare earth minerals. Obviously, you can see there that the US, Australia, Russia, and there are numerous other countries as well, that yes, there are rare earth minerals. We don't necessarily have to be relying on China at all. And quite frankly, in that it would end up being quite a long list. But the fact that you get these three nations stated, you kind of get the point. For anyone to have the notion that thinks that the world will collapse without China and their rare earth minerals, it's just not true. Now, Firas, the guy from that was talking at the Lotus Eaters, he also made comment about how the Chinese have pushed the US to tell Japan to basically wind their neck in a little bit about the situation in Taiwan, where he claimed that the US effectively had to do it because they had, in essence, lost the recent trade and tariff argument. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But it also misses a rather distinct fact, which is that the rare earth minerals that they have in China are largely processed in Japan. So if there were to be any kind of advantage from the Chinese, them being able to think that they can get the US to push Japan around, where the US is doing it on China's behalf because somehow US is scared of China, scared of a trade war with China, it doesn't stack up. It doesn't make sense. So Japan has got a very, very strong position and a good strong hand to be played in all of this. So then this concern goes towards how any Chinese invasion of Taiwan would destroy the world's supply of integrated circuits, chips, things of this nature, due to the reliance again on this rare earth minerals, which, where's Taiwan getting the minerals from? And it all, being dependent on Japan as well. So there's an awful lot of this issue around, well, who's got all of the semiconductors to be able to produce the chips that the world requires? Well, then we get the market share of producing these chips. So, I mean, yes, I mean, the TSMC is the big company, and the factory for Taiwan, which is absolutely a big player. But to suggest that this is an end to that particular supply route would cause absolute doom for the rest of the world is just absolute nonsense. I mean, it's TSMC and that, they're not even the biggest player in the world. They're quite a long way down the list. Now, they have some particular areas of speciality, but to suggest that semiconductors are in Taiwan and nobody else can actually produce anything of any value, it's utter nonsense. And so, in addition to that, taking this into consideration, and if you thought, right, there could be a problem in terms of the amount of supply that the rest of the world needs, and then on the understanding that you've now somehow got this agreement that everybody understands that China isn't going to do anything until 2027. Well, that gives you quite a bit of time in that to be able to create your own supply chain, doesn't it? Now, as much as I've not been able to find the precise details, because when I was involved with this particular area and that, it was more on the basis of an academic paper than anything else, but an awful lot of the sites that produce PCBs can quite easily be changed to produce integrated circuits as well. So this notion that everybody's going to just sit back because, you know, we've got the date in the calendar for 2027. We're all worried about whether these chips can come out of Taiwan or not. So we're all just going to sit there and wait. There's no logic to any of this. And so this notion that Taiwan has got some, you know, magic semiconductor fairy dust that would prevent anyone else from taking their place, no reality to that at all. And of course China knows this. So China is not really in any position to be making demands on the US because they've got their demographic problems. They've got an issue in terms of just a pure cost-benefit analysis, really, because China's dependence on their export markets would be completely destroyed if they were to take up that action. It would literally be, in the Japanese expression, harakiri. Absolutely ridiculous. I don't think China are that stupid. But China is also in no position to be making demands on Japan because they need their processing abilities. And can you say that the Chinese would be able to do some of those processing abilities if they were to have that period of time as well? Quite possibly. But they've not really made much movement in that direction as yet, considering they're supposed to be the ones doing the planning for this big attack. So that doesn't really seem particularly likely. And then, of course, it does tend to get underplayed a little bit here. But do try to understand how fucking big the naval fleet is in Japan. Because it's not just the Japanese. The US military presence in Japan is enormous. Counting how many boats that they have in Japan is not counting how many boats there are in Japan. This would not be some easy ride for the Chinese, even if they did decide that on whatever date that they've penciled in the calendar, it's not going to happen like that. So in short, we've got another piece of rhetoric around war. You've got the one side that's trying to confuse people with don't do an illegal act in war. Another one saying yes, do an illegal act in war. Then we've got this common theme about, oh, China's going to go into Taiwan. And all of it is about creating states of confusion. We keep being told that this is going to happen and that's going to happen, at the same time as none of it making any sense at all. Lots of sabre rattling, not very much practical application there. But I can't do all of this without obviously mentioning the old the Russia situation. And lo and behold, we've got a recent, there was literally a repeat of this earlier on today as well. The Ministry of Defence here with the illegal unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is continuing by way of a line that hasn't shifted in 3 fucking years. Quite possibly the shittest invasion ever. And is it also supposed to be this case that, you know, Putin definitely, absolutely is not in on the wider scam that is affecting the entire world, because of course he's never had any involvement with the people behind the Great Reset at all, has he? This shit invasion is right up there with the genocide in Palestine, which seems to keep seeing their population increase. But then in this instance, you've got old mini-me Zelensky just going around the world, grabbing everybody's cash all the time to go into that nice laundering system. So can you see what I'm getting at here in terms of a lot of the kinds of rhetoric that keep coming out? Because an awful lot of this is based on things that are supposed to be intentionally confusing people, where you're constantly being told two different things. You're told that there's an invasion taking place, when you can see with your own two bleeding eyes, it's not an invasion. You're told that there's an invasion that's going to happen, when it would make absolutely no sense for that to happen. Then you've got the illegal versus somehow becoming legal. Everything is based on some kind of an attempt to brainwash people into the completely implausible, and to make people confused as to whether something is actually happening or not, and what the hell the justification is, and is it our problem? Why are we going into all of this? There's a whole range of these kind of situations. I mean, there are similarities to World War One with this, but this one is a little bit different, because, like I say, too many countries have been involved and signed up to this wider stupid bloody agenda. So what I want to do now is, again, let people understand that this picture is a good representation of what we're looking at. It's quite a well-known meme by now. Change your currency to whatever you prefer. You've got a situation where everything is ensuring levels of confusion, so that it doesn't matter what side of the fence that you try to sit on, and you're trying to make sense of things, but it doesn't matter which side of the fence that you're going to sit on, because there'll be an argument against you one way or the other, because they are basically operating both sides. You can't win in this situation in terms of arguing with this. And though it's been quite a while since I have mentioned it, I mean, I've mentioned it recently online, but in terms of these videos, once again, I'll come back to the divisionary war theory tactics. It's all about playing games with the domestic populations. Now, the thing is about this is that they certainly do want war, or to be more precise on this, in this circumstance, at least the illusion of war. And to make matters more ridiculous, if you were genuinely preparing for war, what you wouldn't do is intentionally and willingly make sure that your entire domestic population is completely pissed off with you and having absolutely zero interest in being thrown into the meat grinder for something that they just don't care about anymore, because they don't care about the people that would be demanding that they go off to fight somewhere. Nobody's interested. Now, if you was genuinely thinking, okay, our nation is at a risk here, or even our continent is at risk here, you wouldn't intentionally be fucking with your own people. You'd be trying to say, no, we all need to come together here and that, because we've got something big coming. These two things just do not equate. The only way it would work is if they ensure that any argument against fighting is combated by literally this arguing both sides, and in many ways kind of demoralising people to the point where it's just sort of like, oh, just let me go, I don't care, I'm so drained of all of this bollocks, and you just give up. But then if you've got yourself into that kind of a mindset, you're a waste of space in terms of being any kind of fighting force, aren't you? There's no logic behind it. But if you do have intentions of your reset, and if you remember how this comes with Build Back Better, it demands that you destroy things first. You demand institutions. You idiot. you do destroy institutions. You do destroy everybody's ability to be able to think for themselves. You've demoralised everybody. So then it becomes easier to control. And this is the kind of situation that has got much more of a valid explanation as to the kind of lunacy that we are seeing. Now, you could very well end up with some minor skirmishes here and there. But because so many nations are signed up to this, I really fail to see how any one of those nations are going to say, okay, we'll be the ones that we'll let you bomb the shit out of our country. We can have our war here. This will be the territory where we do it. And then I'll build my country back up afterwards, eh? Who's going to volunteer for that? I mean, the Ukraine have volunteered the Russian side of things in their country. But even then, that is quite a farce. If anybody's bothered to see the pictures of everything that's been rebuilt already, there's an awful lot of nonsense going on, put it that way. So what we are seeing is literally the destruction of nations from within. And then this situation of creating the scenario where you've got some form of imaginary war. Creating that situation so everybody will sort of start to beg for it all to end. Which conveniently then comes with you giving up all of your money and assets. Whether that's to Zelensky or whatever useful idiot comes along next. Because everything is about stealing your money and your assets. So you will own nothing and be miserable as shit. So in terms of this kind of situation, my recommendations are basically twofold. It doesn't matter how convinced you or me are by whatever narrative or situation is put before us for any kind of war scenario and, oh, this country's going to attack that country, blah, blah, blah. It's all bollocks and we have to just ignore it and resist it. Just go, no, it's a load of bollocks. Not interested. If they do decide that they're going to pick a particular area for some kind of a skirmish, you make sure our children are not involved. And by that, I'm speaking specifically to the parents that do have kids that are in the military. Talk to them. Understand that any war at all will be absolutely on false pretenses. And then understand that you use their own psychological attacks on us against them, where you can tell us, well, is that a legal war? What's the definition? How does all this work? Who are we fighting again? For what? Because likely anything that does happen, as I said, Matt, is going to be it's some kind of a localised skirmish that doesn't really mean anything. So don't have your kids go there. Just literally refuse. In terms of the wider responsibility within each of the nations of the world, basically. But obviously I have to just focus more on the UK side of things here. We absolutely have to be getting rid of these lunatics from our offices. It's a continual theme as I've been going along anyway, but it just gives more impetus for it. Don't sit around waiting for when they may or may not allow us to have an election, because that sort of shit is coming up again, isn't it? And it has been an increasing problem in other countries. So you can have situations where they'll suddenly say, oh, well, we've got this fake war. Well, they won't call it a fake war, but that's what it'll be. There's a fake war going on. Do a Zelensky, no elections allowed. For those nations that might not be directly involved in that, you get the situation like we saw in Romania, where they start claiming that results are not valid. Or like in Germany, where they turn around and say, any party that is actually not a part of our plan, we're going to ban them and call them all the far right and all that sort of stuff. For democracy. Because it's getting that fucking stupid and that desperate. We've got to increase the pressure and call bullshit on every single level of the rhetoric and nonsense that they keep coming out with, every single lie that they tell. And we can push it to such an extent that they're the ones that are not able to tolerate things. They're the ones that get pushed into a corner. And hopefully you get to a point in that where they just have to give up and leave office. That's the kind of pressure that needs to be put on. And when they are pushed out of office, we have to be absolutely clear and certain not to replace them with another version of the same useful idiocy. Don't let them decide when elections are going to be held. Let's start really pushing. So I mean, when it comes down to war situations, this is not me being a bloody John Lennon commie peace and love bullshit artist, because I do think there are certain circumstances where you can make a legitimate case for war sometimes. I know I'd certainly bomb France at the moment, but the way this is working out at the moment, we are not dealing with legitimate people. They are not providing legitimate information. The rhetoric is all based on lies, and everything is being done to take everything from us. It's got nothing to do with legitimate arguments. You don't send your kids out to die for scam artists. We all know that this is it's the situation that there would never be a single one of these cowards, nor their families or anything else related to them, that would go anywhere near the kinds of destruction via theft that they want visited upon us. Because you can quite easily see how rich these so-called working class labour, how rich they're getting off of our backs. It only stops if we stop it. So with all of the kind of examples that I'm putting out here today now, it does show the kind of contradictions and the utter stupidity of the cases being made. And that's effectively what I wanted to try to demonstrate today. And there's going to be an awful lot more. And so understand that they are responsible for the creation and the embodiment of the dead starfish syndrome. Hence the title of the episode. Their ideology has failed yet again. The only thing they know how to do is to repeat at least the mantra of war. That's always the backdrop for this kind of stupidity. They can't actually do it in the way that they did it in World War I though this time, because like I say, the one world scenario, that particular bullshit part of their newfound ideology, dictates that they can't do it. Because nobody's going to be the fall guy for that. They're not going to say, okay, yeah, you use my nation, just destroy everything. Use my nation as the fighting ground and don't go anywhere else. Because that also would look really fucking stupid, wouldn't it? This is their so-called reset. They failed. They want to try to push the button to go, oh look, everybody just look over there. We're just going to start it all over again, and then they would fail again as well. It's about time we get off this particular hamster wheel. And above all, stop falling for this complete and utter bollocks. Because none of it makes any fucking sense whatsoever. So, I don't normally do those kind of Well, I mean, I used to, but of late I've not really done that kind of second segment. But I did kind of think that after some of the stuff that I've been seeing this past week, I thought, no, I'm going to have to make a bit of a mention of that. And because I'd finished doing the 3 entities and I knew how quickly that could be dealt with, and the one that I'm going to be doing next I didn't want to do on top of it. So I thought, okay, I'll have a second segment this week and just have a bit of a chat about some of this bullshit. Aside from that, there was one other thing that took place this week, and that was I had an email from Rumble congratulating me for a particular number of subscribers that I'd got, which I don't have. And I thought that was a bit odd. But it was suggesting that because I'd reached this particular number, that it would be an idea for me to do some live streams, which, well, put it this way. Do pass the videos around that, and anybody that watches this now, do push the subscribe button and all that sort of stuff. And I very seldom say that, but you know, spread it around that and see if I can get those numbers up a bit. But in the coming year, if anybody would be interested in some kind of a live stream where I'll pick a couple of particular subjects, now whether it's discussing the offices and the entities that I've looked at on any given week, which probably would seem to be the logical thing to do, then yeah, let me know. It wouldn't be some sort of, or I don't think it would be some kind of literal sort of chatting with somebody else, other than, you know, the chats that come up at the side. So not a physical chat as such. I mean, if somebody is interested in doing something like that, I can't really see it, but if they do, let me know. But if anybody is interested in taking part in some kind of live stream and asking me some questions about all this sort of stuff, let me know. And maybe in the new year, and that we'll see if a few of those occasions might be able to be put together. I'm easy either way. So that'll do it for this week, I think. And I mean, I'm not trying to be rude to the likes of the guys at the Lotus Eaters, but I mean, honestly, the attack's going to take place in 2027. Oh, come on. Use your brain, mate. I think that'll do it then. So, I'll see you next week. Cheers. Bye-bye.